Hello and welcome. You are listening to the Third Thursday podcast with your hosts, Harry Ozarek and Ben McEntee, where we hope to connect, encourage, and equip student ministry leaders of today. This is a resource provided by the Rocky Mountain District of the Christian and Missionary Alliance, and you can find us on all major podcast platforms. Please hit the like, subscribe, and share buttons to help others be connected, encouraged, and equipped to reach students with the gospel.
This month's January's call is about thriving through the winter doldrums, and just ministry gets tough this time of year in some places for some people, just for a lot of different reasons. And so what we wanted to do tonight was just kind of share a couple of things that we've been talking about as a team. And one is being aware that how this affects us differently. It's going to affect the youth leader a little differently than maybe the volunteers, and it affects the students differently. And it affects different places. There's some places in our district that are much colder and darker and longer. and those places have a different experience, maybe than places where there's a lot more going on, or just even the demographic of what the group is made up, and the size of the group, and all those things kind of play into each other. And so one of the things that we wanted to just say from the outset as we think about this topic is just the idea of being able to know who your students are, what your kind of culture, what your feel is, and just being aware of that. But there are a couple of things, and Ryan and Ben and Harry are going to share something each as we go on, but I wanted to just remind us, maybe this is going to sound really hyper spiritual probably, but in these times where we're tempted to just be discouraged or to press through, that this is really an important time to be seeking the Lord in His Word and in prayer. And I know what that sounds very cliche, but it's one of those things where something's only as valuable to you as when you really need to lean on it. And these are the times when there's a proverb that says, if your strength falters in the day of adversity, how small is your strength? And I think about that with regard to, if we say that we have faith and we're following the Lord, and then something difficult comes and we don't actually press into Him and His Word, that says something. And so sometimes these times are difficult to want to do that. And I was thinking about a psalm, one of my favorite psalms, actually Psalm 73, that is just a psalm about someone being frustrated with wicked people. And just like, God, it just seems like these people are thriving and everything is going good for them and nothing happens bad to them. And like, here I am, like, what's the point of me even being good and faithful? And it's not the exact same parallel as going through a difficult, maybe seasonal time of ministry. But there's a line in here that I think resonates really well and is very applicable. Is at the end of his kind of ranting, if you will, to God about why have I sort of kept myself loyal to you in vain? He says, when I considered all of this, it just seemed so difficult until I entered the sanctuary. And then I saw their end. And this idea that, this chaotic, frustrating, like we're trying to gain perspective, and all of this is hard and it's discouraging. But when I went into the sanctuary, when I went into the presence of God, when I got alone with the Lord, all of a sudden you can almost hear the psalmist say, it was like this aha moment of like, oh, now I see. And it was just my thought as I was thinking about, as we kind of have to push through some of these months where we have, 9 hours of daylight or whatever it is, that, as we think about not just getting through, but what would God even want to do in this time? Is there something that, we don't want to just survive these and get to the fun summer months. We actually want good things to happen, and we want to see what the Lord wants to do in this, but it actually is going to come as we are in His presence. And so I just wanted to kind of open our discussion tonight, or open this time, with this idea that this is the time to really seek the sanctuary. This is a time to put the other things aside, to take our eyes off of what's around us that things might be discouraging us, and really just press into the Lord and say, Lord, we're going to start all of this in your sanctuary, that you can help me see the perspective that I need to have. And so just as we think about how we thrive through these things, the things that we can do, some of them are, as you're going to see, are super practical. This is just the first one. And then, so Ryan, why don't you take the second one? Just what's a practical way that we can kind of lead through this?
Totally. I agree with what you're saying too. There's such a unique soil to this season that we can cultivate. And when I think about summer, or whatever season it is in youth ministry, it can, there's plenty of busy seasons. And this one seems to be kind of consistently and uniquely positioned a bit differently. And I think that offers an opportunity, like you said, Chris, not just to survive, but how do we really press in with what it remains here for us to kind of cultivate? And I think, anytime there's sort of less of a flurry of activity, because I know for summer, that's what it seems like often is there's a flurry of activity. There's also the opportunity to kind of press in and to go, what's here and what opportunities lie here? And so one of the really practical questions is just, what are our goals? Do we have youth ministry goals that we can revisit either in the sense of a year or even in a mission statement that can be revisited in these months to be able to offer some unique perspective for what it could look like carrying out in, sort of these winter months. These months can often, without goals and vision, feel like you're just kind of floating around, and it's you can kind of get that feeling of purposelessness, and we're just in the grind. And so revisiting those can be helpful as a leader, so that you're positioning yourself and your leadership from that place. But I think it's also helpful for your students that you're leading to also be communicating what it is that we want to be about or where we're growing. Revisiting those goals with your students can also help them not feel like they're floating along, but that there's something that's happening in these months that we want to give attention and focus to. And I would just say, in terms of the programming piece of things, having something to focus on rather than, just the normal youth group ministry, thinking about what opportunities are there for outreach or service, or maybe we need to have a fun night as a community because we're just kind of cliquey and we need to, bridge those relational gaps, discerning what is it that our group needs in this season and how can we kind of press into that by providing an opportunity for us to focus on one of those things together. I really think a great way to also invite the students into this is to offer it as a question to your students and just saying, hey guys, what do we want to focus on this season? Hear from them. They have a unique perspective and a valuable perspective. And one of the things that'll help this season feel less like floating for them, because it's a struggle for them to be engaged. Often they're in school under fluorescent lights, it's dark and they're not moving a ton. And so they can start to get checked out. And so one of the ways to keeping them engaged, just giving them ownership for the vision and mission that you have in your youth ministry and helping tap into their ideas. What is it that we want to do in this season with that mission and vision together? And so you might invite that in the form of a night where you guys just have some collaborative discussion and say, hey, we want to do one thing in these next 4 months together. What can we do? And, opening it up in that way will allow them to feel included and able to just say, yeah, this is, when I show up on whatever night of a week it is that you meet, this is my place. I have some ownership here. And so that'd just be a way to kind of give some focus to the season is by revisiting goals, missions, and vision, and including the students in that. So Harry's got the next one. So I'll give it to you, Harry.
Right on. Thank you, Ryan. Yeah, I appreciate all that insight on setting goals. The next one that we wanted to share with you all is prioritizing personal growth. And you may have heard a variation of this saying of it's difficult to lead someone further than you've gone yourself. And so during these months, I think many people that I've witnessed, as well as myself at times, really struggle to find that self-motivation and things like that during this time. And so we wanted to highlight this piece. It's one of those things that I think sometimes can get kicked into the side drawer. And we need to get this stuff done. We need to get these, things on the calendar finished, or we got to start planning for this next thing. And this idea of us being healthy and strong kind of slowly falls to the wayside and crops up its ugly head a lot of times, I think, around this period of the year where you're maybe a little more impatient. Maybe you're not feeling as much peace as you were when you had kind of everything, set, and you had a lot of energy and things like that. As Chris mentioned, you got 8-9 hours of light in the day. and you feel like you just woke up and fell back asleep without even seeing light. And like you went to your office or you went to go study, and then you come back out and it's dark already. You're like, what in the world? And so one huge thing that I would want to impart on all of you is to be in your word and to be praying. And that sounds like a duh, right? That's one of the biggest duhs of being a Christian. But highly encourage you, if you're struggling with a habit of doing that in this season, to reach out to some of your other volunteers, to reach out to your pastor, and so on, and to really like pull out that maybe you don't normally do like a devotional, pull that devotional out and help start that again. Another big thing that you could do is to be filling your heart and your soul through listening to worship music, listening to some really good podcasts and things like that, which, just a shameless little plug, we have a resource page that has some of those things that you can go to on our website, on the RMD website. And so I know Chris or Ryan is going to share a little more about that at the end, but there are great ways where sometimes just for myself, when I'm sitting in my office doing stuff, that I kick on a podcast and I don't catch every single word, but what I find is it just penetrates my mind. And if I start getting a little uneasy or anxious or worried or frustrated or whatever, that just going and hearing those really good truths can be a huge help. Another thing that you can do is plan a training or a conference in this season. Just about every single year, I take a group of our leaders and students to the next conference in Minnesota. And that's strategically placed there to accomplish what we're talking about, as well as, again, another shameless plug, our Youth Leader Weekend, which takes place in March. All right. So you might be coming towards the end of the winter doldrums. You're ready for spring, but that snow is just sticking around. Come to the Youth Leader Weekend, bring your leaders to that, find refreshment, recharge, and those kind of things. And then the last thing I wanted to share with you is don't forget about your leaders. If you may have heard the phrase, if there's a mist in the pulpit, there's a fog in the pew. And I relate this to that as well, which is if you're struggling a little bit with prioritizing your own personal growth, there's a fair chance, a fair bet that your leaders are struggling with it too. And so those trainings and conferences can be a huge aid to that, as well as if you find a great podcast, text your leaders, share that with them and encourage them that way. So with all that said, I pass it off to Ben.
Awesome. Thanks, Harry. And so we started with setting goals and then personal growth. And finally, we're going to end with kind of just refreshing your space, your physical space, and maybe even your calendar. One idea is usually at the beginning of the year, there's kind of a break or around the Christmas time and the new year. It's kind of a new time. It's a good time maybe to rearrange your room. You might not necessarily have a budget to do that, but just think outside of the box. We normally sit in chairs. What can we do to rearrange this space to give students a fresh look on the way in which your youth night operates? You can change things up, go to a different room, turn the room around, do something like that. With that being said, you can invite your students in. It gives them ownership, as Ryan was talking about, to allow them to take part in that. Say, hey, what is something we could do here to kind of mix it up? What if we changed the chairs like this? Or what if we removed the chairs? What if we did this? Allow them to take ownership and to be a part of that, and then they will buy in. I think that's pretty awesome. It helps the students feel connected and excited about the meeting space during these months. I also just think about if I'm a student and if I'm going through the winter doldrums, if I'm just kind of trudging along or floating along through this time, if I have a future event that I'm anticipating and waiting for, it can be Snow Craze. Certainly there's a pitch. Snow Craze is awesome. We want as many of our C&MA youth to be coming out to that event. Certainly that's going to be an awesome weekend. But also in your own context, what is some kind of an anchor event that you can put down? I'll just say for us, we've done in end of January, our youth group, we do a broom ball night, and I call it world famous broom ball night. It's like the annual event, and we do it, and we hit that hard, and kids can anticipate those things. And if you lay those in, if you have a win on your calendar, by the way, don't feel like you can't reproduce that. Do it again the next year and just add it a little bit or change it. It'll be something that they will always anticipate and be excited for. And I think if they're going through the motions and just kind of a little low because of just the atmosphere and everything that's going on around them, to have that something to look forward to can really pull them through that time. So anticipation of future events and activities can help. And in the end, I would say this, like, you get to ask yourself this question: how can you leverage this time, this winter time where there are fewer activities that people are doing? How can you leverage that time for ministry? I would consider myself to be a pretty optimistic and positive outlook person. So I look at something that can be perceived as a negative and say, how can I flip this on its head to be a ministry win? It's kind of like this saying, there's which is, a child is not a problem to be solved, but a person to be loved. In the same way, a season, you look at it and go like, okay, I'm not saying to love the season, but how can I take something that could be difficult and turn it into some sort of net positive? What can I do to do that? Looking at it differently. So leverage this time, instead of seeing the winter times as an obstacle, how can you use it to your advantage? And I'll just say this, like, this is overall for ministry period, but in relationships with students, this is the time to build that. And one thing that you need to do is, if there is no trust between you and your students, or your leaders and your students, if there's no trust, there really is no beginning to that relationship. Build that trust. And then after that trust, if there's no fun in your youth environment, right, then there's no return. Right. And if there's no challenge, then there's no continuation. So you build trust, you make sure that there's some fun in there, okay, because God can use that. He created that. Don't allow those older folks to tell you not to have fun, because God can use a silly game to transform a kid's heart. Let that go. But then also you're going to challenge them spiritually, and that will continue help those ones who are going deeper to continue to grow. And that's awesome. So leverage your calendar, leverage the season to make a real impact in the lives of students. And you can make the winter season, as dark and brooding as it can kind of be, to be a time when they're looking forward to. So that's it.
Thank you for listening to the Third Thursday podcast. We hope you feel connected, encouraged, and equipped to reach students with the gospel. You can find more resources at rmdcma.com/youth. If this content was helpful for you, make sure to share it with a friend. See you next time.